My name is Paul Campbell, and I'm going to continue to read Message to the Millennials by Brother Rizza Islam. Chapter 8, Mental Health and Mental Illness, Fact versus Fiction. Have you ever noticed that mental health has become a major topic across this country? And mental health has always been a topic at different points at different times within the ebb and flow of society. However, mental health is a good thing. Mental health is the same as every form of health in that it should be managed. It should be well taken care of. It should be balanced. It should be monitored by the individual, and it should be helped so that everything can flow properly. In a world like this, it is very difficult to be sane. In a world like this, it is very difficult to walk around and see what is going on. To be on your phone and to read what is going on and to watch videos to see what is going on with all of the constant negative. This bad problem. That back problem. This new story. That video. This person is shot. That earthquake in that country. This thing the government is doing. That thing these people are doing. Etc. It just seems like an overwhelmingly heavy cloud of bad news constantly hovering over us when we are simply trying to live and do our best on a daily basis. And if you are someone living in a poor condition or environment, living on a government assistance, living from paycheck to paycheck, struggling with children, struggling to maintain and do your best without doing something illegal, just to make it, your mental health is constantly in a battle. It is something that has to be maintained, sustained, protected, and enhanced constantly. This is why we must always find our balance. Find the things that you love and find the things that help you maintain a good state of positivity. If you have a spiritual system that you believe in, whether if it is Islam, Judaism, whether if it is Taoism, Nuwabianism, whether if you are Hebrew or whether you study ancient Kemetic signs, if you are simply a spiritual person and are connecting with the universe, find that spiritual balance first. Then you must find the mental balance which comes from having a strong spiritual balance, and things will be much easier. Now, in this world, not only is mental health something that is constantly discussed, it is also something which is constantly manipulated. Hence the term mental illness. There was a long history in America and in the world of this term, mental illness being the justification for genocide, the justification for forced sterilization, the justification for imprisonment, enslavement, and the like. Yeah. After World War II, a new eugenics was resurrected out of the bones and the ashes of the old eugenics. The eugenics movement has been at the forefront to establish a new scientific racism that justified an oppression and exploitation and racism. Racism is inseparable from the roots of psychiatry. The entire history of psychiatry, beginning with scientific conclusions that were made in the 1830s, was an effort to prove the intellectual inferiority of Black people. Benjamin Rush, who was the father of modern psychiatry, came up with a term called a negritude. He said that all Blacks have inherited this so-called disease, which was a form of leprosy, which caused our skin to be dark and that caused us to be inferior. In addition to that, it was the reason why it was very important that Black people remain segregated and separate from whites so that whites do not inherit this so-called disease. Benjamin Rush justified segregation as a medical necessity, and that became an argument to continue slavery. So the fact that they brutalized, raped, robbed, pillaged, and murdered an entire group of people had nothing to do with that at all, and had to do with Black people having this supposed mental illness. Again, a so-called mental illness being at the root of the problem. Interesting. So seeing how we were diseased people, whenever a slave master wanted to get rid of a recalcitrant slave, they could just say, oh, well, they're suffering from this disease. Drapetomania was another so-called mental illness and disease that was coined by Samuel Cartwright, who said that Black people have a mental disorder. If we had a desire to run away from slavery, as insane as it is, they truly believed this, and what was the cure for this so-called mental illness that we had? Whipping the devil out of us. Yes, that was the official cure for our mental illness that we had after slavery was abolished. Psychiatric racism was only persisted, it intensified. Psychiatric racism not only persisted, it intensified. The American Journal of Psychiatric officially proclaimed that Negroes, Black people, as descendants from savages and cannibals, were ill prepared for higher civilization. That was from Dr. W.M. Beavis, who was a psychiatrist. While all their pseudo-science is circulating, eugenics stepped up its racist activities. There is a very clear, long, and intimate relationship between the eugenics movement and the Ku Klux Klan. Harry Laughlin, who was the Carnegie Institution's director of the Eugenics Record Office, had a close relationship to the Ku Klux Klan through the publication of a book called White America, which was written by a major Klan leader named Ernest Sevier Cox. Laughlin wrote a golden review of the book and the eugenics news. He stated, Ernest Sevier Cox, is considered a greater savior of his country than George Washington. While Harry Laughlin is writing this golden review into eugenics news, you have to Ku Klux Klan at the time using eugenics to justify their racist goals. But psychiatric racism wasn't exclusively American. Some of the worst abuses of the 20th century occurred in South Africa, where the government adopted the same racist theories and practices used by Adolf Hitler. This was no coincidence. The Prime Minister, Dr. Hendrik Verwoerd, had studied eugenics as a psychology student in Nazi-influenced Germany in the 1920s. He was regarded as the architect of apartheid. He saw South Africa as a divided state with whites, blacks, and brown people living in totally separate areas, with Black people having no rights whatsoever, with apartheid in place. Psychiatrists established mental hospitals throughout the country that were in fact nothing more than slave labor camps. These places operated under a private company by the name of Smith, Mitchell and Company. They were saving money through cheap accommodations for psychiatric patients, aka Black slaves, while making a massive fortune out of money that Parliament had appropriated for medication. So it was a corrupt system. When this operation was finally exposed, it was discovered that 67,000 people had died, while at the same time, psychiatrists had collected $117 million in funding from the South African government. The World Health Organization declared in 1983 that psychiatry had cultivated racism, and that a part of it did have a parallel in the ownership and trading of slaves. The World Health Organization Commission stated, certainly does have a parallel in the ownership and trading of slaves. In 1971, Los Angeles psychiatrist Louis Jolly West continued psychiatry's legacy of racism, hatching a secret version of therapy experiment called the Violence Center. His government-funded plan was to implant electrodes in the brains of African Americans and expand. The plans for Hispanic males was to shock them if they exhibit any violent behavior. And if that didn't work, then chemically castrate them with drugs. When this proposal was met with public outrage, the plan was quickly shelved because people figured that he had lost his damn mind. So although his program and experiment was stopped, these racist systems pushed in the mental health field were not. In 1994, psychologist Richard Herrnstein co-authored The Bell Curve, claiming to prove that blacks were genetically disabled and therefore inferior to whites. The Bell Curve really argues and touts the old eugenics idea. It argues that Caucasian people are born superior by nature to those of blacks and Mexicans. It goes back to the notion that black people are genetically and inherently inferior to white people as a way to justify these programs of racial discrimination. Okay. They utilize this completely through the educational system, using the IQ test, using the areas of special education, and other means. This new tool fit into the old mold. It was a new tool that they used to prove in their efforts of intellectual inferiority of African Americans. Yes, so what we should absolutely analyze and look at here is when mental illness comes into question. When it comes into question for black people, it is used as a justification to remove rights. However, when it is used for white people, it is used as a justification for their evil. When mental illness is used for black people, it is used as a justification to take away our children and to take away our jobs. However, when it is used for white people, it is used as a justification to make an excuse as to why they committed mass murder. Do you see and understand the connection here? All throughout history, when the question of mental illness, mental stability, and mental health has entered into the equation, when it was for black people, primarily, it was used to justify the murdering, killing, and of course sterilizing of us, and even the aborting of us. All had a basis in our mental illness, mental health, or mental framework. Yet today and in the past, and I'm sure in the future, for those who are Caucasian or those who are white, and everyone in the world can see this when their mental health has been brought up. With mental health being brought up into question, all the way back to the shootings of Columbine with Eric Harris and Dylan bulk, all the way up into 2019 and beyond. It has only been brought up after an atrocity has been committed, whether there was a stabbing of someone, or whether there was an attack, or whether there was a mass shooting or murder. When they go to court, the mental illness or the mentally insane or the declaration of insanity is their universal cop out. It is their trump card or their literal get out of jail free card. And that is something that everyone has to analyze, understand, and note at what point will we see them being treated the same way we are treated. Also, if they have such a high level of mental illness, then my question is, why are they not in mental asylums? Why are they not taken out of society? Why are they not put in the areas safe and secure or away from the general population so that the general population can be safe if they have such high levels of mental illness? It seems as though every single mass shooter is mentally unstable. Well, of course, that is evident. But seeing how it is evident in the blatant evidence should point to the fact that we are not safe with multiple Caucasian white men running around with semi-automatic rifles and guns freely. Not only are we, as black and brown and original melanated people, not safe, but even other white people are not safe. These are things which have to be understood and changed. For if it is not confronted, where will this world be in the next 5 to 10 years? Guns are absolutely brought into question because with the high level of insanity running rampant in the society, how can we truly trust not only others, but how can we trust ourselves with guns? And of course, for some, they feel that a gun is necessary. And of course, I understand this, especially living in a world under a tyrannical system of governance. So if you feel that a gun is what you choose to walk around with, that is perfectly up to you. But at some point, this government is going to come down on all of us, those with or without a gun. And we will have to be ready and prepared to handle ourselves accordingly, to protect our families, to protect our children, and to establish things for ourselves. This is why our mind has to be right. Study more, educate ourselves more, learn more. We have to continue to build and construct mental muscles in order for us to survive. We have to be of sound mind, less drinking, less smoking if not, no drinking or no smoking, and require this in order for our mental facilities to be as sharp as possible. Whether if we are doing it for our children, our family, our community, our nation, our people, or simply ourselves. We must think about the bigger picture, and if our mind is not under our control, then who was controlling it? Think, it ain't illegal yet. Eddie Griffin. And that is chapter 8. Chapter 9. Argue over religion after we are free. Period. And that's chapter 9.